Hello and welcome. This is the first event run by the Future Thinkers.life, part of the .life organisation, where we specialise in supporting businesses to be the very best they can be, creating communities which are diverse, inclusive, supporting, and most importantly, sharing. Our aspiration for the Future Thinkers series of discussions is to look at sectors of our world today and to try and visualise what they look like in 3, 5, 10, 20 years' time. At this moment in time, it's going to be difficult to anticipate the future. But let's think about what the future is going to be looking like. We hope that this event tonight will enable our listeners and members to position themselves for the exciting futures which lie ahead. Tonight's discussion is all about events and the events industry. Many of us, pre-COVID, took things such as parkrun, conferences, exhibitions, festivals, football matches for granted. We paid our money, we turned up, celebrated, and then planned the next one. For some, we probably never even guessed that there was a global community called the events industry, an industry which before COVID was worth £70 billion and employed 700,000 people, making it comparable perhaps to other sectors in the UK, such as the car industry and the construction industry. Come March the 23rd last year, it all stopped. The COVID story is well documented, and the heated discussion about the industry, including the demonstrations which have happened, have highlighted the plight. We've all had our plans for what we're going to do. Mine at the moment, the obvious one for a middle-aged man with COVID kilos, as many of us are going to be suffering from, is to run a marathon. But I've also a vested interest in the event industry, as I've been trying for nearly a year and a half now to put on a conference of my own. And it's going to be a really exciting conference. Actually, it's more than a conference, it's a happening. It's a conference on block paving, concrete block paving. So to help me with my exciting aspirations and to tell me what the picture is going to be looking like, and to answer our wrong big question tonight, what is going to be the future of events? And to answer the question, I've got Martin Fuller, Kevin Farmer, Andrew Metcalf with me. We were going to have Meena Chanda tonight, and due to some unfortunate family circumstances, she's unable to be with us. And our sincere thoughts are with her at this really difficult time. Martin, Kevin, Andrew, welcome to all of you. What I'll do is let you introduce yourselves. You're going to be your best salesman. And please tell us how the year has started and how you see initially where we are. Firstly, Martin, if I can come to you, please tell me about yourself, Martin.
Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Martin Fullard. I'm the editor of Conference News magazine, which is a trade press title for, unsurprisingly, the conference and meetings industry. But I'm also the editorial director at that publishing company, which is called Mash Media, which oversees other magazines, including the likes of Exhibition News, Access All Areas, Conference and Meetings World, and Exhibition World. 2021 has started exactly where 2020 left off. And I think, you know, it's lovely in normal times to sort of think that December 31st to the 1st of January heralds a new dawn, but the reality just isn't like that. The situation was looking far more optimistic towards the end, or sorry, rather towards mid-December last year, where we were, before we had any idea we'd be going back into national lockdown, and before this so-called Kent strain of the virus had become more widely known. And we were hoping that perhaps by Easter time, you know, we'd be looking forward to a reopening of the industry. That has not materialized. At the moment, it is more likely that we'll see larger events happening maybe towards the end of the year, from the autumn, I suspect, but there is certainly a chance that we'll see some manner of events, mid-sized events, happening from as early as May. But it does very much depend on how the government takes us out of the lockdown. If we re-enter the tiered system, which we were in before, business events and general events were mandated to certain criteria. So if we drop back into the tiers 1, 2, 3, and 4, then it will be quite easy to actually put on some events in a local setting. If it's a national lifting of the lockdown regulations, then it becomes a complete unknown. Part of the country could be ready before another half of the country is, and then, you know, nothing's going to be easily managed. So There is relative causa optimism as the vaccination programme rolls out that we will have the return to live at some point this year. The question very much is when and what restrictions the government put on us.
Brilliant, Martin. Thank you so much. It seems really at the moment that everything is still a grey box, isn't it? It's all there for a canvas to be written on, but we don't know when to pick up our pens and start writing at the moment, do we? So we also have Kevin Farmer here. Kevin, let you introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everybody. My name's Kevin Farmer. I run two companies based out of Milton Keynes. Results Base is the main company. We time events, manage events, do online entry for events throughout the country. On a normal year, not 2020 year, we would do something like 500 events a year.
500?
500 a year, covering right across the land. But this year we've probably done less than 20 in total. So it's as Martin was saying, it's pretty devastating for the events industry. In particular, we do the endurance side. Luckily, we've got another company called Big Cow Sports. Big Cow Sports was set up in 2003, and that was really a company that I worked on just to support Results Base. Results Base is pretty seasonal, the work we get. So to keep our staff busy, we created events outside of the busy period, and because we can manage the events, we can work our way through we've worked our way through the COVID thing. We've managed to get quite a few events on through this tricky period. Clearly, nothing is going on right now, but during December, for instance, we put on an event for nearly 2,000 people over 2 days. So you just have to be a little bit inventive of what you're doing.
I think that's the thing, isn't it, Kevin? We've seen just throughout the last 12 months, and it seems really odd to say 12 months, but yeah, throughout the 12 months, not just in what we're discussing tonight, but everything else, we have stepped outside that box, haven't we, and been quite inventive. Even the conversation we're having tonight, we probably wouldn't have dreamt about.
I think we'll probably talk about it later, but there is some good things that eventually might come out of this. There's some different ways of looking at stuff. Who had actually heard of virtual events before this? Who would want to do a virtual event running on your own? But we actually, I think we've managed over 100 virtual events at the minute.
I noticed today, even the organisers of the London Marathon have they're planning 50,000 runners in October and another 50,000 running virtually, the largest running event ever to behold. And I think they've even encouraged people to go and download their certificate from the Guinness Book of Records. So yeah, like you say, Kevin, there's stuff there to be really positive about. The final panel that we have, or the final panel member that we have, and I hadn't forgotten you, Andrew, I do promise you that, is Andrew Metcalf. Andrew, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Andrew. I've worked in the publishing, exhibitions and conference industries for an end of 25 years as a graphic designer, marketeer, conference and exhibition organizer. And I currently organise a series of running events called Ultra 5K. We managed to get our running event on last year in that small pocket of non-lockdown. Kevin chip times the event for us, and I think we were about the first running event to be to actually hold in August last year. And even then, right up to the point of the day before, we still didn't even know whether we were going to get it on, because if it was near Bedford, and if Bedford had gone into lockdown during that week, then we wouldn't have been able to put it on. It would have just suddenly all crumbled apart. So we were also looking at putting an event on, a sister event in January, February this year. Unfortunately, we didn't get very far with that because it wouldn't have happened. So yeah, it's very difficult for any mass participation event, even outdoors, to even look much beyond what's going to happen tomorrow, to be fair.
It's certainly been, yeah, I think that's where a lot of us are, and I think that might be why so many of us feel as we do at the moment, is we can't just look beyond tomorrow. It's really difficult to drag that lethargy and really think about what tomorrow holds. But the purpose of this evening, and I'm really hoping, and I think with the gentleman that I have in front of me, we're going to end on a really high and positive note about how it's going to look like in 2, 5, 10 and 20 years time. So the big question that I have, just to start with, and I think we've touched on this already, gentlemen, but what will the long-term effects of COVID be on the events industry and the events that it creates? And if I can come to you, Martin, but if either of you other two gentlemen, Kevin and Andrew, want to join in, please let us know. What do you think the answer is?
Well, the landscapes are ever changing, so let's kind of, remain sensible here. None of us are epidemiologists or virologists, and we are not going to be able to dictate terms in that way. We're only going to be able to work with the parameters which are forced upon us. Do I think, for example, social distancing will be around long term? No, I don't. I think that that's just completely unmanageable. However, when you look at things like hand sanitizer stations and general hygiene measures, it's going to be very difficult for any one venue or organizer to kind of go back. I see no reason why things like that will not stay. So I think we probably have healthier events. But kind of expanding the conversation, I think we do have to acknowledge the kind of financial damage that's been done. So you mentioned earlier on that the events industry is worth £70 billion to the UK annually. It's actually 84 billion if you include weddings, but I'm just going to break this down and contextualize it for everybody listening so they can understand how this actually breaks down a bit. So this is value in direct spend at the end of 2019. Okay, so this is the most recent set of data that we have. Conferences and meetings were worth £18.3 billion to the UK every year. Exhibitions and trade fairs, 11 billion. Incentive travel, 1.2 billion. Corporate outdoor events, 0.7 billion. So that's the business events side, totals 31 bill. We add then arts and cultural events at 5.6 billion, festivals, fairs and shows at 6 billion, music events 17.6 billion, and sporting events 9.6 billion pounds. So that's direct spend. It is estimated, and this is only an estimate from Visit Britain and the Business Visitors and Events Partnership, that figure has been reduced by 58 billion pounds in direct spend. So that's not just a big hit, that is a planet-ending hammer blow. So our industry is effectively going to have to build from the ground up when we emerge from this. I think there's no escaping that. There has been mass scale redundancies. Modest estimates put it about between 150 to 200,000 people in the events world have lost their jobs. We'll never truly know, because many freelancers who would count in those statistics wouldn't be on a payroll. So how much work have they not got over the last year? So it's a devastating blow. But one of our biggest problems has been that we've never been on the government's radar. And there is a simple reason for that. And we mentioned this briefly before we came on air, was that when you register as a business at Companies House, you have to assign yourself to at least one, maximum of 4 SIC codes, standardized industrial classification codes. There's about 752 of them. There are only 3 of those 752 which relate to the events industry. Exhibition organizer activities, conference organizer activities, and event catering, of all random things. But they don't have their own section. They come under the service section. So therefore, I did an investigation. So I went to about 200 event businesses that I know. Only about 20% of them were using one of those 3 assigned codes. All these other businesses, which are events businesses, are assigned either in marketing and PR services or recruitment services, strangely, or this, that, and the other. So when think about it, when the Treasury is looking at how big sectors are, it's not seeing the events industry. As far as they're concerned, the industry doesn't exist. So when we say, oh, the events industry is suffering, they don't actually have any tangible evidence to understand that. The figures that I quoted you earlier are the result of some Herculean research by the Business Visits and Events Partnership, and they are accepted by the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, which is the sponsoring department of the events industry. But I'll come on to that in a moment. But work this year in terms of getting support for our sector, we were about 3 or 4 months behind other industries. Before we could actually ask for help, the government wanted to know who the hell we were. How were we defined? What was the events industry? So we had to galvanize, we had to come together, and how that was, honestly, I cannot tell you how sometimes complicated that can be. There are, I think at my count, somewhere between 26 to 30 trade associations operating within the events world in some capacity. It's a minefield. It's very confusing. And you've got to understand that these government officials, they want it simple. They need to make a quick decision. We needed to get our house in order. We have made progress. That's the positive stuff. At the start of the lockdown last year, we didn't get a mention, ignored, left out of all government guidance. Come the autumn, Mr. Johnson was even acknowledging us openly when he was addressing the Commons and in the daily Downing Street briefings. So that is progress. We're now in the guidance, and that is where we will start to talk about the positives. When we emerge from this for the first time ever, the events industry will have a clearer cut identity. We will know exactly who we are. The government will know who we are, and we can begin to structure ourselves properly. And then all businesses that benefit either directly or indirectly in the events industry will then benefit. I'm mindful I've been rabbiting on. I've got more to add, but I thought maybe I'll just take a quick pause, and if anyone else wants to
have a glass of water. Martin, what you say really, and like I said to you in my introduction, I'm a complete novice. I've come into this sort of wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, and really didn't know that much about the event industry beforehand. But the associated businesses which are on the periphery of that, and the knock-on effect, surely, you know, within government itself, you must be able to notice that there's a huge deficit just from this industry not working. Yeah, and you would have thought that the government would wake up towards that.
Let me blind you with some more numbers that maybe add a little bit of context. The events industry, let's be clear, the events industry, it doesn't look after itself at all. It exists almost by definition to support other sectors. It's a horizontal across any other industry. So if you go to, I don't know, for example, a car exhibition, what are you seeing? Are you seeing the automotive industry, or are you seeing the events industry? You know, we support those other sectors. But we also do, and this is the bit that I personally love the most about our sector, but it's criminally under-recognised, is how important we are to regional and local economies. Not just, you know, in the UK, but all over the world. We exist. Our industry supports local livelihoods and local businesses and local economies in ways that many people don't understand. Glasgow is a great example of that. That's a real conference city. Newcastle's just spent £260 million on a brand new events arena, which will cater for exhibitions, conferences, you know, gigs, the lot. Hull, when that was the city of culture, what a great legacy. The Bonus Arena opened up as a result. Events is very much the cornerstone. A good example for you would be Liverpool. Liverpool's events industry, right, supports 38,000 jobs in Merseyside. It's worth £3 billion to Liverpool annually, and is also responsible for 48% of the business rates. That's the events industry alone. That's the benefit of it. So what I'd like to see going forward is that the events industry at government level is factored very much into local economic development plans, because it really is a fantastic opportunity for, you know, former manufacturing destinations to regenerate and to rebuild. The events industry is absolutely the horse you want to back.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Martin. I was talking to a colleague in the construction industry recently, and part of their development stipulations, part of the regulations under the development plan, is to ensure that there's an arts and culture section within their developments. And this is, you know, to create a healthy community, this really has to be the way forward, and the only way you can do that is, as you say, to bring it up at a government level. Kevin, I'm really conscious you've been listening to this. What's your general feeling? Are we going to come out of, or what are going to be the long-term effects of COVID?
To be able to speak as quick as mine would be pretty good, because and the way it brings out all those figures, unbelievable. But for me, there's you know, mine's more down on the ground sort of information. You know, we talked recently about the virtual events. The virtual events have seen women increase in sport by, it used to be about 10% when I first come into the industry. At the moment, it's more 60 to 40 women versus men. So it's great to see, you know, that whole change. And I think it's a little bit because women in particular not necessarily keen on that pressure of everybody up the start line and that big push forward. They're really loving the new starts that we're doing with the roll across the start line. So they're enjoying that side of it. I think this is the bits that's going to come forward, the new ways of doing things. With a rolling start, you don't get queues for the toilets, you don't get queues for the car park, you don't get queues for the registration. The whole thing seems much more relaxed. So I can see that we maybe run a 2-tier type event system in the future. One for the ones that would like to race as a group, and those that would rather not, we can run those as a sort of a rolling start with less pressure.
So you were going to add something there, Andrew?
Yeah, it's interesting because at some point over the period of the next X amount of months, that the industries will start, the conferences will start coming again, and I think from a running event point of view, that the virtual event will continue. Just as you said about London Marathon, running a virtual event alongside it, and with conference and exhibitions, now that we've invited people into our homes in terms of webinars and conferences online. There's a certain demographic of people that will be comfortable going ahead with that, and it's encouraging people to come back to events, coming back. So we've got the people who are itching to get back to whatever it is, but then there's people who are, and it goes back to the point of hand sanitizers and keeping apart from everybody. I think you're right, Martin. I don't think we can continue being 2 meters apart, but I think certainly for the foreseeable future, hand sanitizers and that sort of thing will be around for quite a while, and whatever temperature checks and stuff. And it's how you encourage that and make people comfortable that they can come back to the events when the events can suddenly just go, yep, I can have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people inside, outdoors, wherever.
What are you going to add to that, Martin?
I think Andrew just touched on a really important, really valuable point there. I think there's an analogy that I use for where the events industry sort of finds itself at the moment, and look no further than journalism. For the guts of 200 years, the only way you could get your news was through a printed newspaper, right up until that ancient time of the late 1990s. It was the only way that people would get their news at large was be through a printed newspaper or, the TV broadcast. Today, there is now multiple ways that people get their news. Yes, newspaper sales have absolutely plummeted, but the audience is still there. They're consuming their news through different mediums, through online, whether it's through a tablet, on a phone, some people through video, some people get all their news through social media. There's so many channels. Events are going to probably need to start following that format as well. So it's not just that single analog moment. It's not that print newspaper, that there are multiple channels with which you can keep a community engaged. Any event organizer effectively is always wanting to communicate with a community, to bring a community together through whatever means. We're starting to hear now this word called omni-channel. So event organizers, I'll use exhibition organizers specifically, are no longer just focusing on their one event throughout the course of the year. Their event is, or their brand rather, is not defined by the 2 or 3 day show that it exists, but that brand now needs to exist, and that message needs to exist over the course of the year. So do you send out weekly newsletters? Do you host monthly webinar or chat rooms or roundtables or whatever else? There's so many different mediums. What does this mean? Does this mean that rather than traditionally having 10,000 people in the exhibition hall, you might have 5,000? But is that such a big deal? I mean, is it always just been about the numbers? Is it not about the quality of the delegate? Ultimately, you're going to expand those communication methods. And that's what omni-channel kind of is. And I think that's what we're going to see more of. Not necessarily organisers working harder, but working smarter.
No, certainly from previous experience in, and I keep harping back to the construction industry, but with it, we have one show a year, well, one big show a year at the Excel called EcoBuild, where it's the good and the great get to go to this conference down at the Excel Centre. And I've stood on these stands for 3 days in a row, admittedly with a splitting headache after entertaining customers the night before. And we judge our success by the number of people that come onto the stands. And a number of years ago, I can remember working with a business, picking up on Martin's point, and it was literally, you know, if we could run these events from our home office, if you could have a virtual walk around a construction show, would that work? Would it be something that's you know, that's feasible? And every time we asked the question, the feeling that we got back was they still want this interaction. They still want to see the whites of people's eyes, to be able to touch flesh, shake hands, which I appreciate we can't do at the moment.
That's really interesting, Matthew. Could I just ask you a question then? When you got your leads on your exhibition stand, roughly how many of them did you actually follow up with after the show?
Yeah, Martin. Yeah, that is the crux of it, Martin.
Do you know what the industry standard is?
Yeah,
it's a paltry 20% of leads that you accrue while on your stand get followed up with, which is pretty woeful. And I think what that comes down to, this is on the organizer to actually educate exhibitors to not waste the opportunity, and don't just put the 20-year-old trainees on the stand for a few days because you don't value that. When you're on that exhibition stand, that is a big job, and you have to nail those leads. You have to follow up with those, and you have to add, you know, you really have to chase those connections. I think a lot of exhibitors go into these shows with having unrealistic expectations or objectives. Ask an organizer to ask his exhibitors what his objective is. You know, what is it, how many people are you supposed to see? Well, I want to see, you know, there's 10,000 people coming and I want to speak to 1,000 people. Okay, but if your pitch is 10 minutes and there's 8 hours in a day, clearly you're not going to get anywhere near 1,000 people. You're going to, you know, get about 40, 50 maximum. So what's your objective? And I think that's where we need to be smarter, justify the value of those who are there, not necessarily focus on how many tens of thousands have come through the doors.
Yeah, and I think there's some real value in what you said, really there, Martin, because I know certainly we've got one lady in the audience this evening whose business has been, I won't say devastated, but has certainly been really badly hit, and she's an ancillary business to the conference. She does a lot of childcare for whenever there's a conference. This particular lady has a business that runs crash facilities and specialist childcare that goes alongside it for attendees of conferences. And what this lady has done is positioned herself now as training other people that attend conferences and other people on how to actually set up this particular section, how to go into it. So we're seeing some diversification from people within the events industry, and I suppose this comes back to Kevin's point at the very beginning about thinking outside the box, and you know, we are going to have to think differently, and like you say, Martin, we're going to have to just place more value on this interaction that we have with people, and how can we get sorry, a message has just come up from the lady in the audience, and it's just flashed across my screen far too quickly for me to see, so I do apologize. I will come back to it when I say it again. Andrew, what's your feeling on that at the moment? Where do you think we are?
I think from a running event point of view, I was talking with Kev a couple of weeks ago about this, actually, where there is a certain group of people who will come along and all they want to do is get a medal. They'll just want to turn up and be part of something that at the end of it they can walk away and say, I've taken part. And that level they've just been stripped away from that. And you know, I'll go back to that and trying to encourage those people to come back. I think you'll always get your hardcore exhibition goer or event goer in terms of a delegate point of view. They'll always go, but that's going to be a small amount. So I think that on the back of that, there always has to be something else. So, for example, a running event will have to have a virtual event. Will a conference have to have a virtual event on the back of it as well? And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think from a lead generation point of view, you know, the years and years ago when you went to you were stood on a stand, and I think, Martin, you're absolutely right. When I was a 22-year-old wearing my first suit, you would stand there and hand out magazines and try and get a business card off somebody, and the business card would be the lead for the salesperson. And how many did they actually? How many of them did they actually answer the phone, and how many of them were actually valid? or they were trying to win an M&S hamper. I mean, so I think it's kind of like it's being more targeted and more direct of who you want from rather than the 10 or 11 people queuing up to come and speak to somebody. Maybe there'll be a 10 or 15 minute slot and you can't turn up until that slot, and it'll just be a higher quality of delegate potentially. And I think potentially you get that with outdoor running events as well. Yeah.
Is that what you feel, Kev?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's going to change, and I think people might start to respect other people's thoughts. But I mean, the whole thing. A lot of people have got lots of different views about COVID. But wearing a mask, you shouldn't wear a mask. I think what people realise now is that really, whether you believe it or not, you should do it to respect other people. So, for instance, we put on an event, and because you think people want to come to it, but there's still a lot of people out there who are still too nervous to come to it. So you need to offer, and I think we'll need to offer it for a long time, but both options for those that really don't want to get back into crowds for a while.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you see, I'm desperately trying to think of the name of the band now, but I think it's Flaming Lips. Put on a concert the other night, all in Zorb balls with, if you get too hot, you do this, and then if you need to go to the toilet and everything. Just how fantastic. They've created a whole another combination industry almost of getting Zorb into the pop world. But then my immediate thought comes from that is, if you've got these big old Zorb balls in Wembley Arena, for example, that's got to halve your capacity by 50%. And then how do you actually make this particular function work? And how then does it have a knock-on effect on the suppliers? How are they actually going to be able to afford for that? Because you've got the retail outlets and everything else that goes with supplying a conference event almost halved in terms of merchandise sales and everything else. So that's going to have a massive effect, isn't it, from distancing?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, it's all going to depend on who's around at the end of this, because I think the next 3 months is going to be the decider. Must be, people are hanging on to whatever reserves they've got.
And Kevin, that really neatly gives me the segue into my next question of who is going to be around at the end of this, and how are you actually going to encourage the talent into this industry? Because Martin mentioned the figure of 200,000 people that we've lost from the events industry. So that's 30% of the events industry. That's a devastating loss. I know in previous industries where perhaps borders have tightened and workflow, and take agriculture for example, where workflow hasn't been as easy perhaps to get to the picking season, their industry has been devastated. So if we've lost 200,000 people out of this particular industry, how will you attract that talent back into it? And if you, Martin, and I'll come to you first, were actually going to pitch this in a school, how would you pitch to someone joining this particular industry?
Well, it's uncomfortable, really, isn't it? You come on these sorts of things and people sort of expect you to have a magical answer, which is, all positive and everything's going to be okay. But the grim reality is it just isn't. Right now, you couldn't sell. What industries could you sell? If you're working in pharmaceutical or e-commerce, then you might be all right now, because those two sectors are booming. But economy, nationwide, worldwide, we're all suffering. It is going to be an incredibly hard sell to get people into the events industry. Anecdotally, I've spoken to hundreds of people over the last few months who have left the industry, not through choice, but because they've had no choice. So what we're going to sort of find is we're going to have almost like a skills boom. All that talent's still out there. Will live come back? Yes, it absolutely will. Therefore, there will be a demand for more people. I think, if anything, this lockdown has taught us just how much we value live experiences. So I don't think there'll be a question of demand for talent, but some people are going to be thinking twice about it. Traditionally, there is a great buzz about the events industry. It's certainly a very common path to walk for those who maybe haven't, gone down the route of university or something like that. There are no barriers to entry, and once someone gets a buzz for it, they're normally in it for life. But many people just sort of fall into it. it does give you a whole lot of flexibility. It's a very diverse industry in terms of the tasks you can undertake, and you can move around. If you move into event sales, it doesn't mean you're always going to be in sales. You could find yourself in operations or running your own show. It's, you know, there is still so much for it. But of course, then you might turn around and say, well, if there's another pandemic, don't really fancy my chances there. I'm sorry, but that's just the reality of life. You know, there's risk in whatever you do. We get a recession every 10 to 15 years. Events are generally all paid for from marketing budgets, and marketing budgets are always the first to be cut. You can't go into any job kind of thinking that everything's going to be all right. There's always going to be risk. And I think I'd pitch that honesty to any young and upcoming talent, but you will enjoy it in the good times. That much is certain. And I will add that there are a lot of transferable skills. You know, as the aforementioned people I've said have left the industry and gone elsewhere. Hey, they have gone elsewhere. Their project management skills, for example, have been appealing to other sectors. You know, construction, architecture, things like that. Project management skills are very useful. So it does give you the opportunity to work elsewhere, I'd say, but there's no sweet sugared pitch as far as I'm concerned.
No, and I noticed yesterday, I think the government Kickstart scheme is really trying to get is really trying to get youth starting. They're funding 6 months worth of salary and everything to get the younger generation into the workforce. Is that something perhaps, Kevin, that you've thought about with your business? Is that something that you would encourage people to look at? Can you actually, do you have enough business to even think of taking on people into that?
Right now, no.
Yeah.
You know, so we're down to a skeleton staff now. The staff that we wouldn't wouldn't want to let go, and we don't want to let go. But but when things hopefully start improving, once we know when that is going to be, then we can start planning for it. And Martin said, it is an exciting thing. Our small little business, we put on and time events. But we do so much more. We've got a production office. We've got design office. We've got we produce T-shirts. We're looking for new ideas all the time. We've just bought a laser, so we're cutting wooden medals. Loads and loads of different skills that you can do. How many jobs do you get where you have that kind of variety in a job? And then, of course, weekends where you're out at events and you're sorting out routes, you're marking out routes, you're cycling around with people. All right, there's always the negative. You always get people complain about things, but to get somebody to come up to you and say that was a fantastic event, that's what it's all about. And people want to be involved with that. Sometimes they don't realise how hard it is, but.
I think that's one of the massive things that we've seen over the last 10 months is this growth in community, isn't it? And how easy it is to grow community online and perhaps transfer that into the virtual events that you've been speaking about. And that's got to be a massive positive in terms of where you are. What's your take on this, Andrew?
It's following on from what Kev said there. Funny enough, I mean, we'd go back sort of just before this all happened, back in January, February, and we were on the verge of launching Ultra 5K in Switzerland. Now, clearly, from my point of view, I can't sit in my office and manage that on a ground level. So it was an opportunity for somebody to take the reins of that in Switzerland and franchise/license it. The buzz that you get in the industry, whether you're in at whatever level, however you are as an event organizer, as a delegate, you get something out of it. The buzz at the end of it, of people coming up to you and saying how happy they are. People need that interaction, and it's fantastic. And I think that I personally, from a running event point of view, would certainly, I think that the smaller localized events have got more opportunity in the short term to get back on track. The 100 people or so, and then eventually that can grow from there. But from an industry point of view, from the buzz that you get, and the skills that you you gain from that, people skills, etc., etc. I think it's a fantastic industry to be in, and it will bounce back. It's just at the moment that what that date is, who knows?
Yeah. Well, I think we at the Future Thinkers, we literally set up this whole organisation in the depths of the first recession. So we're not even a year old, and we set it up as a walk-in event. And at the time, the conceptual time for it, we weren't allowed to go out and walk with other people. And then I think our first walk was the 1st of June. And our sort of movement has grown since then. And I know we've got some of our colleagues who are listening in this evening. I see that as just growing. It's going to grow. There are without a doubt the stresses that come with it, but I think if we build a firm foundation of concept at the moment, then there is this opportunity to grow significantly, really. And then probably from that, it's going to bring me on to my last question this evening, or my last main question that I want to ask this evening, and really the whole purpose of what we're here to do. And I think we've touched on it already, but Martin, 10 years time, what's it going to look like? What's the events? What event will you be attending in 10 years time?
Well, in my job, probably most of them. I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to say that I don't think you'll see any sort of major revolution in events. If you strip it back to its bare essentials, an event is the bringing together of people, the facilitating of network and knowledge exchange and business. That will always be the core. Getting people to meet, getting people to experience, and experience is the key word. There will be a more technical, a more event tech hybrid element. I think that in that there is no doubt. I don't believe in this sort of online events or virtual events or whatever we want to call them are going to replace conferences. No, they just won't. At the end of the day, if you're in a B2B environment, it's always about the business objective. What is the business objective? How do we achieve that? What do we need an event to do it? Yes, right. Well, in that case, does it need to be a live experience or does it need to be an online one? What works? If an online experience works, then hey, so what? That's what it is. No problem. If it's a live experience that's required, then again, that's what I just don't see that changing. Events haven't really changed because it's about the people there. You can have all the bells and the whistles. You can stream your sessions online and so on. Fair enough. I would just be mindful of putting a blanket over the event as an event. Everything is always going to be very sector specific. If you take healthcare as an example, it's perfectly understandable that a lot of doctors or other healthcare professionals would find an online alternative more appealing. Traditionally they have to get their CPD points. They would normally have to take 3 days out to a conference. In most cases, that involves international travel. Not every country has an NHS like we do. If you're in the States, if you're not working for 3 days, you don't get paid for 3 days. If you're in private practice. So all of a sudden, a doctor says, well, why do I need to take 3 days out? I can just log on, I can still work and earn some money. Therefore, it works. What about manufacturing, though? Or aviation? That's not going to work online. People there are going to need product demonstrations of big bits of kit and whatever else. They need to see them in the metal. So we are not going to see a blanket sort of all events will be hybrid or everything will be online, because it will differ sector to sector. That's really important to remember. As long as everyone always focuses on the business objective of what it is any client or events purpose sets out to achieve, it will always be based on people. Will numbers be down? Yes, but I think quality will be up. I think marketers will have to be more savvy with how they get their event out there and the event information about it out there. So I don't see anything majorly revolutionary, if I'm honest. Just smarter thinking.
Smarter thinking, and I think that's the theme, isn't it, Martin? Really, from what we've seen over the last 12 months, anyway, is just adapting. Really, what's your view, Kevin?
I'd like to think if I went back 10 years, what was it like 10 years, and then look forward 10 years, and I think. But then there's been this massive thing in the middle, that's changed a lot of things. Like I said before, there's definitely more women in sport than there used to be, and I think that's going to, you get a slight change which would encourage more people to join. Like, for instance, the rolling starts I mentioned earlier, that's going to include more women because women prefer that, less pressure, not all the time, but mostly. Does that mean that more women are going to come on because of that? And then, before you know where you are, it could be more women coming to events than men, for instance. So these things, that we've got the eco side of things. I think that's going to have a big impact. When I was racing 30, 40 years ago, nobody cared about a medal or whatever. At the moment, it's the only thing that matters is the medal and the T-shirt. Not almost like the event is just something you get out of the way so you can get your medal. Maybe the actual event will be the thing that's the important bit, and the reward is just a pat on the back, and you don't necessarily need that. But it could be those subtle changes. But I agree, I don't think it's going to be massive changes.
So bearing in mind, for example, at the moment we're going through this huge vaccination program, and it appears that the numbers are really promising. That it appears that we're getting quite a few people vaccinated. Come the summer, most of the over 50s are going to be vaccinated. Are we going to be in a position to have an event in the summer, do you think? I'll open it up to Kevin. You can start.
I think I don't know about everybody else, but I feel a little bit tired of trying to second guess this because
I think that's where Martin started.
Yeah, I think with the South African or the Brazilian and now the Kent one is starting to change its shape as well. So they're starting to panic about that. I don't think we really know. I'd love to think at the end of this year that it's started to get back to normal, but I'm sort of planning that maybe it won't be. We're already seeing events from May slide back to September. I remember last year thinking, oh my God, how are we going to do September? In the end, we did 3 events in September, and Andy's Ultra 5K was one of them. It's I'm trying to be positive because I have to.
I think you're right to be positive. I think you do have grounds to be positive, Kevin. I think there are telltale signs. At the end of the day, we are racing through the vaccination program as it stands, and if that endures, then I think we'll see the return of some smaller to mid-size events by June. Don't forget, we've got the G7 summit, which has been announced by the government only a few weeks ago, which is due to take place in Cornwall in June. So that again is an indication, and these things generally have a pattern, and that's an indication that some manner of live events will be permitted by then. I noticed a question in the Q&A box here which mentioned over 50s. You won't find any kind of age specific events or events over 50s. That's just unworkable. I think people can forget that at large, because it's not just the event on the day, it's where those people are going afterwards and how they're moving around and so on. So I don't really think age specific events are going to happen, but I'd be reasonably optimistic that we'll see some events will have a bit of a pulse by September. And I believe me, like you, Kevin, second time to try to second guess it all, because you never know where the next surprise is coming from.
Andrew, what do you think? I mean, you've got an event to run.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that the smaller events come sort of July, August, September have got a good chance of being put on. You look at how we did the Ultra 5K last year, with everybody social distanced, everybody getting temperature check, a staggered start. I think that will carry on for a considerable amount of time from a running point of view. Can I see mass participation? Certainly not. I mean, to think that you're going to get them on in May, the spring marathons this year, I think it's a bit of a pipe dream. And I know there's a couple of marathons for September have already been cancelled. I can't see any big events, but certainly from the smaller points of view, the more localized, I think that there's a good chance that they will. So I'm optimistic from my point of view, and I'm working towards that. But as a runner, will I be signing up to a big marathon? I don't know. I really don't know.
I guess we find out next week, Andrew, don't we? Whether I think it's the 8th of February that the London Marathon team are coming out with whether or not you've got a place without the ballot, isn't it?
I'm not holding my breath for that one.
I think you've been holding your breath for a number of years on that one, haven't you, Andrew?
Yeah. Can I just mention, that it's, you think things are going to be fine, but then because people have, this is more our events, is the endurance sport side of it, not the exhibition or anything else. But if things come live in May and June, people need to be training now. They would normally be swimming now. They would normally be, doing normal stuff now, and they're not. And so to expect somebody to go and do an Ironman or a half Ironman in June or July is going to be really, really tricky. And we work with a lot of those kind of people that are trying to plan events in June. And I just watched some of the comments on Facebook, how are we going to get fit for something in June when we're not even allowed to go swimming?
But the thing is with that as well, it's no different to a conference exhibition where you've got your exhibitor promotion and your delegate promotion. You've still got to do that 3 to 6 months in advance. So you've got to start thinking about that and spending money potentially to get an event going on in September, October. So there's always people thinking way ahead to hopefully get to the point where that event will be on.
Sorry, I think you're right, Andrew. It's I mean, like I said at the outset, I'm pondering on trying to get marathon fit. And it's difficult at this time of year. All the marathons seem to be having to run in the February early morning horribleness, don't they? But it's difficult to get the motivation when you don't really know what's in future. There's some really interesting questions coming in on the statements coming on the Q&A along the lines of how some of the suppliers going to manage and actually going to survive. There's an interesting one from Gail, which is said basically that exhibitions, a lot of people need to see the whites of their eyes. They need to have the touchy-feely experience, and I think that there's that driver in there. As Martin said, we are going to have to think more about how we're actually going to get a return on our investment from entering into a conference and actually making those leads a lot more valuable than just the 10-minute pitch that goes into it. So I think over the last 50 minutes, we've really managed to have quite a romp through the events industry. We've looked at all aspects of it. There's some numbers that Martin very, very kindly brought with us that really are astounding. And if we think on the sidelines of the industry, the associated businesses that earn their living out of the event industry and everything that goes in it, it's been a really, really difficult time. I'm getting the feeling that we're a long way from being out of the woods. None of us particularly want to predict what's going to happen in the next week, in the next month, in the next 6 months, and it makes it really difficult to actually say what it's going to be like in the next 2, 5, 10 years. Martin's point about the fact that events are going to be very, very similar in 10 years' time as to how they are now, I suppose, stands really the test of time, in as much as innovation brings the new fancy bits that come with it. We're going to have to think a lot more seriously about how we get that return of investment. But at the end of the day, it's about building that community and turning up to be part of a community where we're allowed to. So I really want to just end our conversation before I thank everybody for coming out this evening, or for coming to Zoom, coming out, I wish, this evening. But Martin, what's your reason to be cheerful today?
I'm about to just put in the comments box a link to the UK events report. Now, it's 192 pages long. All right, so you might need a few nights, but have a glance. All right, so that's in there now. If you need me to send it around, Martin, I can. But just by looking at the numbers in there, you will begin to see the scale and the depth of the events industry and just how big an economic pillar it really is. Something like that doesn't just die. People always want to experience things, whether it's participating in a sport themselves, or going to an exhibition or trade show relevant to their field, or a conference relevant to their field, the desire for human experience isn't going to go away. All the information you could need is there into the scale of our industry. I'm confident that the government will factor us into future plans. I have got some authority from associations. I think the future will be bright and more structured, but unfortunately, we've got to do a little bit more suffering first. And I do genuinely feel sorry for the small businesses out there who the next few months will find it very difficult indeed.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, appreciate that, and for the information as well. We'll make that available. Kevin, what's your reason to be cheerful?
The few events that we did put on in 2020, sorry, when people actually get together as close as they clearly couldn't get too close together, but they love it, and to see people get together like that, I think as soon as it gets off, it's like, when you watch TV and you see people in crowds from 2 or 3 years ago, and you think, well, how it's almost like we've forgotten what it's like. But I think as soon as we start getting back together and we can get close, it's. I think the human nature is just wanting to be together and enjoy it with other people and share things with other people.
I agree with you, Kevin. I think that's lovely. Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, I'd mirror that. I think that people are desperate to get back to seeing each other and talking to each other. And I think that it'll be we've all had that pause at the start of last year that went on, and then we've gone into another lockdown. I think once the go ahead and happens in whatever form, and as Martin says, it won't be just a blanket, it will be, over a period of time. I think people will be more appreciative of that and a bit more understanding. And I think that if we can all take that ahead with us and not be maybe so gung-ho about everything, and actually pause and be more positive and look for the right things, I think there is a reason to be cheerful. Short term, get over that, and then we'll move on, definitely.
Brilliant, Andrew. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you. So there we have it. A reasonably positive look at what hopefully will be the phoenix rising from the ashes of the events industry. Hopefully it's going to come back, and I think it will do, bigger, bolder, brassier than before. And I suppose if you think about it, we've been entertaining each other for millennia, and our conversation tonight just demonstrates that it's going to take more than a horrendously tragic virus to put a stop to entertaining each other and the events industry. We're beginning to see the green positive shoots of recovery coming, I think, from our colleagues and what they've said. I think, like they've all said, there will be some optimism coming through if we can hang out. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Kevin, to thank Martin, and to thank Andrew for joining us and for their input this evening. It's been really, really appreciated and hopefully thoroughly interesting. We're going to return on the first Tuesday of every month with our next topic, the Future Thinkers Consider Employment. That's not that we're going to be going out and trying to find a job, but that's employment as a whole. And what is employment and the employment market going to look like in 5, 10, 20 years' time? So from me, Matthew Hoddinott, thank you all for joining us this evening, and thank you for joining the futurethinkers.live. Good night.